Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to cover a fairly advanced way of affecting the animation of the scale here. So the first thing I wanted to talk about though is just adjusting some of the attributes over here. I'm going to dial back random strength just to add some variability to this. So if you can imagine, the camera on the inside here, it'll just add a lot more interest, visual interest, if we have these different kind of layered cubes here scaled so it's not super even. And that'll also help when they animate in that they'll be a little more random as well. So this will give us a lot more randomness and kind of visual interest as we get going here. So to animate the scale, like I said, you could animate this by setting a key here, but it would all go together. And what we want to do is have a little more control over it. We want to be able to fine tune exactly how this cascading effect of everything scaling back down occurs. So how we're going to do that is with a strength map. So if we scroll down here, we can see under strength what we had open as well, where we had the random strength, there's a strength map. So if we just dial this back down, we can animate that too. And when you think about a strength map, a map, if you're in Maya, really means a texture, and that's why this is a color, right? So it's indicative of a texture. So what we could do is we could actually pipe in a texture to this, because you can see this little black and white checkered box. That means we can actually add something here. So let's first take a look here at map projection axis, because this is going to really affect what we're doing next and how we're going to visualize it. But you know what? So it's set to Y right now. And again, the same thing about it being scaled in Z. Imagine this texture we're about to project is going to get projected on the Y axis, meaning up and down. But I don't want that. I want it to be projected through from Z straight on. Because let's say I want to do a wipe from left to right. I want all of these to scale starting on the left and then for it to get wiped. And as I am scrubbing my mouse over, these will cascade and get scaled down accordingly, right? So if it's getting projected from the top, we could kind of do that, I guess, as well. But just for the sake of visualization, I want to do it from the front since everything is kind of happening from this Z axis. So let's just switch that to Z right now. And we can switch it back to Y later and kind of show you the difference. But so I clicked on this checker box, and that opens up a Create Rendered Node window. And I want to add a ramp. So I'm going to click ramp. And the reason I want to add a ramp is you can kind of already tell. Click and drag any one of these. Check this out. I mean, pretty quickly we have a ton of control over this thing, right? And it's doing it based on that axis, if you can remember what we just controlled. And again, if we change that to Y, it's probably not going to, I guess it does make a difference on, I don't really know, honestly, how it's projecting it down from Y doesn't make that ton of sense. But you can kind of see it affects it in a different way. Yeah, on Y, I don't know, that doesn't really make sense on why it's behaving this way. So anyway, I think that's why I originally chose Z anyways, because this just makes more sense to me anyway, that it's affecting the voxelization or the scale of these based on this Z-axis projection. So imagine like from this view, this ramp is being projected into this view, right? So there's another way that we could use this and actually visualize it as well, is using a helper, right? Because it might be a little hard to control this. And let's say, we want to animate this like spinning. We actually want to leave it like this, but we want it to spin around. We could maybe rotate the UVs. It's a little wonky. And you can see how it's kind of clipping the corners as it rotates. And we can't really visualize the UV place texture thing. It's kind of a hidden thing. So let's get a map helper here and apply that ramp to this, and it will help us visualize this type of an effect. So let's go back to the offset node, and you can see there's a map helper that it's asking for a transform. So what that is it could just be a plane. So let's create a plane, and this is going to be our little helper to help visualize this this ramp. So just scale it up, and I'm just kind of moving it to the center here. Doesn't have to be perfect. We can always change it and move it around later. So now with that selected, I am going to go back to the mesh offset, kind of what we did earlier with when we were doing the voxelization. I'm going to middle mouse drag this into the map helper and let go. So check that out. So now it has mapped that the ramp onto our map helper. So now when I rotate it, you know, we don't have that weird clipping thing where it was kind of making these on the corners pop out when we rotated it from the place 2D texture. So check this out. You know, you can kind of envision this ramp right now on this texture. You know, if we hit 6, it should show textures, but you know, behind the scenes, it's doing all this stuff, right? It's using this plane as a map helper, and it's applying this texture to this plane, this map helper, right? This is our little map helper here. And so it gives us much finer control. You know, it's just another level of control, right? We have the strength map, which we can still control here. But we also have it here on the map helper itself. So let's get this kind of centered up. And if we want to visualize this, we can connect it through the hypershade. So let's just open up the hypershade with this little wheel sphere up here. And we'll get this new window that says hypershade. And we can just add a new material to this plane. So I'm going to right click it and go to assign new material. I'm just going to use a Lambert, which is fine. And then when I have the Lambert 2 here, which we can call it, you know, map helper, just so we can keep track of this stuff. So that shader is called map helper, right? So where's our ramp texture? How do we plug our ramp texture into that? Well, we plug it in. We've already made it. We know it must be in here somewhere. If we go over to textures, there it is, ramp. So we can bring it in, middle mouse drag it into the hypershade, and now we have the ramp texture. Now we just need to connect it to the color. So let's go out color to the in color here. And now we have those two things connected. So now we can actually visualize it, and we don't have to kind of, you know, imagine it in our head. We can actually see it in the viewport, okay? And now we can kind of see why the scale of the mesh network is behaving the way it is. So it's pretty cool. Now, what I want to do is add some noise to the texture. You know, everything that we're doing, every step along the way is just adding a very, very slight amount of complexity to our animation. And that's why we're using a more advanced kind of strength map option here, is I want this thing to animate kind of from left to right on the scaling down. And I want it to do it in a very interesting way. I don't want to do it in a linear way, meaning it just gets wiped on or wiped off. I want it to kind of spin. I want to use this spinning element here that now that we have this map helper. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to animate the ramp, and I'm going to animate the map helper spinning. So let's first animate the ramp. Let's go into the ramp, and let's bring this white value all the way back, and we can kind of see that. The other kind of interesting bit of complexity that we can add here, and I'm just bringing this black all the way over because you can see, you know, I can keep bringing this over and it's not doing anything. So I want to kind of, it's like, you know, starting a race and your foot's not on the starting line yet. Like you want to be on the starting line. So that's why I'm bringing the black all the way over to kind of the starting line where the edge of this voxelization is happening. So now we have that kind of, everything's on the starting line, ready to go. And we can set a key on the selected position here. So I'm going to right click and say set key. So if you look down here in the timeline, we're on frame 1. So we need to go forward in time. Let's just go to frame, let's go to frame like 20, let's go to frame 36. And I'm going to bring this over. I'm going to right click and say set key again. So you can see that we are going to need to also animate the black side here. So let's go back to frame 1 and let's select the black color here and keyframe its position. So we'll set a key there. Now I'll go back to frame 36. And let's just drag this thing over. So now it finishes that wipe. I'm just going to bring this all the way over. I'm going to set a key. So now when we scrub, it should do this wipe that we want, which is pretty cool. So it's very linear, and I think we need more time, but how do we adjust those keyframes, right? We don't see it in the timeline down here. What we need to do is open up the Windows Animation Editor's graph editor. And when we open that up, you can see we have the kind of keyframes of the selected position. So we can just drag these over and give it more time. The other thing we can do is take the selected position of the black color, which is 0, and we can offset that to be later so that there's this more of a gradient happening here, right? Because we don't want it just to be like a hard edge of it wiping on and off. We want it to be kind of a smooth edge here. So it's we need to delay the start of the black. We want the white one to start, so it starts this kind of grayer area, and then the black catches up. So it's a much more smooth transition there. All right, so let's keep adding complexity. The other thing that we have at our disposal is the noise of the actual ramp texture. So if we take a look at the ramp texture, I don't know if we'll see it that well in the viewport, but we can increase noise. Take this ramp and just kind of crank this up. Look how it affects the edge here, right? So it's no longer just a straight edge. So now when we scrub the timeline, it should be a little less, clean. It should be a little more staggered, and we can increase the frequency if we wanted to. We could also animate these things. We could animate the frequency. We could animate noise on and off if we wanted to. But you can see where we're introducing this noise where it's adding some more complexity. And again, I'm always looking for interesting ways to add some complexity to the animation without much effort. Because we already have the ramp hooked up, we might as well kind of see what we can get with all the little tools built in, like this noise. So let's scrub here. So you can kind of see now it's not all kind of going cleanly together in a straight line. You can see there's different pieces that are getting scaled differently. It's pretty cool. So now as we scrub, we can see that kind of randomness happening, and it's all getting scaled back down. So again, what's another thing that we could do to add complexity? We could rotate the actual map helper as the ramp is getting animated. How trippy is that? Okay, so let's let this start. Maybe let's let it start a little bit. I'm going to hit S. Well, S would keyframe everything. We just want to keyframe the rotation, so I'm going to hit Shift E. The other way you could keyframe those is go to the channel box rather, and select these and right click and say key selected. Shift E is just a quicker way to do that. So I'm going to scrub forward to kind of the end, and I'm going to rotate it all the way to the other side. So let's see, what is that? We kind of have a bunch of random rotations here. Let's go back to that first keyframe and zero this out so these all kind of make sense. I guess, yeah, these are both 90, and this one should be 0 just to make it nice and clean. So when we scrub to the end, let's just rotate this kind of 180 degrees. So that should be negative 270, right? If we know our math, every 90 degrees. So now take a look at this animation. We have the ramp getting animated as well as the map helper getting animated. So it's just adding some complexity. Let's put the camera kind of where it's going to be, just to kind of pre-visualize this. And we don't really need the map helper. So there's a couple ways we can get rid of it. We could hide it, or we could make a display layer. So let's make a display layer, and we'll just turn off this P. So what that means is when we play back, it should disappear. Check that out. So, and I just have loop once on over here, so I'm going to turn on looping just by clicking this option a couple times and getting this loop symbol. It should loop back. So you can refine this as much as you want. Feel free to adjust this animation, but look at all the complexity we added. Imagine having to hand animate each one of those cubes. Would drive you insane, right? Like that would be impossible to go through each one of these little cubes and animate them this way. This is what the power of procedural animation is you can get many, many things animating and make adjustments very, very quickly. For example, if I think we still need more time, let's go to the offset node. Let's select the strength map, and I'll select it here and go to Windows, Animation Editor's Graph Editor, and let's just take the last two keyframes and drag them out a little bit, right? I just want it to have a little more time. So I'm going to get over here to where it should be done, and I'm going to select the map helper. And I'm just going to drag the map helper animation over as well. So now when we play, we just turn off the graph editor. I'm hitting Alt-V as a shortcut. You can kind of see the animation we're getting. And again, depending on how you want this to look, you could, have it spin twice as much, right? Let's go to this keyframe, and instead of 270, oh wait, we're actually adding, let's see, we're going, yeah. Let's just go all the way around, do something super crazy. 630. So now it's really going to spin around. So I'm going to hit Alt-V to play. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. So we're just adding more rotation there. I think it still needs more time. Because everything's going way too fast. The other way we can change animation for the whole scene is going into the Window Animation Editor, the dope sheet. This feature is a lifesaver. Go to View and go to Scene Summary. Now we have this little layer here that is the scene summary, and we can just select all these kind of end keyframes and shift middle click and drag all these over, right? So now we can just really quickly, instead of having to go through each one of these objects, we can just use the dope sheet and do that. I'm just gonna drag that off the screen a little bit so we can see our animation. Now let's play this back. That looks, I think, a lot better. I think the one goofy thing is you can kind of see it starting over here on the left. And I'd rather it be a cleaner start. See how it kind of starts and stops? And I think that's because of the noise we have in the ramp. So we could just start that ramp a little sooner. Let's scale out here and see what's going on. This is one nice thing about like hooking up this texture so I can actually visualize what's happening. And let me just hit P over here on the display so when we're scrubbing it leaves that up. Yeah, I just think the ramp, this map helper is rotating too soon. So let's let the ramp get animated on, right? So the ramp's getting animated on, and then this thing starts spinning. I think that makes a lot more sense. So let's get our camera back in the center of this thing so we can kind of visualize how this is gonna feel and look, and hit play. Oh, let's turn off P here so the map helper doesn't display while we're watching. Yeah, that looks a lot better. I still think I would like that to kind of finish. I think maybe we could even wait a little bit more. Yeah. That way it does kind of finish a little bit. So it's not kind of like bouncing back. But these are the little things you can kind of have control over as you get going. But also feel free to open up this scene file with all the downloadable project files to kind of get a sense for what I'm doing as well. So In the next lesson, we are going to continue adding more complexity to this animation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you there.